Hey there friends, and thanks for joining me again. And today I want to talk to you about why we didn't choose a rural homestead. There are actually 8 reasons why we did obviously chose to go with, instead of a rural homestead like we used to have, a semi-rural one. And the first reason, of course, is going to be cost. Land around here is extremely expensive. And so when we were looking around at the houses that were in our price range, the ones that had property were almost always out of our reach. The only ones that were within reach were very small houses on a bit of land, which really wouldn't have been an upgrade. We really did need a little bit bigger of a house than we had. If you remember from the video when I did the little tour, yeah, it was a bit of a tight squeeze for, 4 people, and I didn't want to have to do that anymore. I wanted something that would be a little bit bigger, a little bit more comfortable, and so there was a trade-off there. We either had to go with a bigger house with the same amount of land, the bigger land with the same amount of house, or what we chose, which was a little bit bigger of a house, a lot bigger of a house actually, a bigger house with a little bit more land, which is totally cool with me because I'm used to being on a small amount of space, and so I knew that we could make that work. And so that's what we chose to do for cost reasons. We just chose to go with something that wasn't quite so rural. The next one would be convenience. Not only would we have to end up, having to commute to work or driving a lot, there's a lot of wasted time spent when we have to commute. So, not only would it be more convenient for us to be closer to, say, grocery stores and other things like that, it made more sense to us if we were still close by and, didn't have to be driving on dirt roads for a long time trying to get there. Especially since we get a lot of snow here in Colorado. We knew that in the winter time, if a commute was 20 minutes, that could easily double or triple with snow, and we didn't want to have to fight that much snow, especially on rural back roads, dirt roads that didn't even get plowed. So for convenience reasons, it seemed to us like the semi-urban homestead where we are now is a better solution when it came to convenience. The next one would be health, and I will say that this is not a hard and fast rule for everyone who lives everywhere. Unfortunately, health is an issue for us when it comes to farmland around here. It used to be that when you lived away from the city, you got away from all the pollution of the city and all this, and the farmland was the healthier place to live. Unfortunately, that's really not the case anymore. We have a lot of genetically modified crops that get sprayed with a lot of pesticides and herbicides and other things. And so being out in the country where there is a lot of farmland can actually be a less healthy place to live than the city, believe it or not. And again, this is not a hard and fast rule. It depends. If you consider, a super rural farmland to a giant city, there's going to be exceptions. But for the most part around here, the farmland is a lot polluted with the agricultural chemicals and things like that, and I didn't want to have to be near all of that. So for health reasons, and especially since that stuff can actually get into the groundwater, and a lot of times when people would test their wells around here, their wells would test positive for all of this stuff because it seeps down into those well water. For the health reasons, we actually chose to go with the city, on the edge of the city, so we're not, right in the city where all of the traffic and stuff is going to be, to where we're not as close to all of that, but that we're not super rural to where we have to worry about all of the spraying of the pesticides and all of that other junk. So for health reasons, I think we chose, the best option that we could. The next one kind of goes hand in hand with the last one, and it's gas and oil drilling. One of the houses we actually looked at it online, and we were like, whoa, this is actually a decent house. It's got a big piece of land, and it's got a nice, decent little house, and it doesn't even look like it's in bad shape. Why the price? Why is the price so affordable? So we got there to the open house, and it turned out that the house had a oil well on it. On its property. And unfortunately, when you buy houses around here, you don't get mineral rights. You basically just get surface rights, which means the gas and oil companies can come in, and as long as they have their little easements required by the law, they can set up an oil well right on your property, and that can cause all kinds of problems. They can cause, explosive hazards. There's, the thing about them being able to pollute the groundwater, etc. And so I don't want to get too much into this because I understand that we all need the oil and the gas, and it seems like we're all in this boat where we want the oil and gas, but we don't want it in our backyards. I'm gonna admit that that's pretty much the boat that I'm into. I want the gas and the oil, but I don't necessarily want to live right next to it, especially having it move in on our property. And even if we would have chosen a rural spot where there wasn't oil and gas, if it would have fit within those, you know, their legal limits to be able to set one up, who's to say that it won't come along later? And unfortunately, that stuff could diminish property values in a hurry, like we found out with that really nice house on a big tract of land. It would have sold for a lot more if it wouldn't have had that oil well right on it. So that is another reason we don't want to be near all that oil and gas drilling. The next would be that we like modern conveniences. So while I like to play around with stuff like off-grid this and that, you know, cooking off-grid or doing laundry off-grid and that sort of stuff, I don't want to have to live that way all the time. I don't necessarily want to have wood be our only source of heat and, you know, sun ovens and, you know, wood and stick stoves and things like that being our only source to cook. I do like modern conveniences. I like electricity. I like my electric stove. I like lights. I like internet. I like a lot of things like that. So with that in mind, I still want to be able to play around with that sort of stuff, and if there was ever an emergency situation that came up, we would be able to, you know, have a pretty good idea of what to do, but we don't have to have it be something that we're constantly having to do all summer long with, you know, no electricity, and then all winter long with no heat, that sort of thing. So yeah, we like our modern conveniences. Next one kind of goes hand in hand with the last one, and it's that I'm not really all that concerned with doomsday scenarios, which seems to be one of the main reasons why a lot of people, not everyone of course, but many people have chosen to move into these rural communities and be off-grid and that sort of stuff. It's so that when this catastrophic doomsday scenario thing plays out, that's going to be the best place to be. Now, I do believe it's important to prepare and be prepared for, you know, things that could go wrong in life, for sure. I just don't think it's a good idea to make huge life decisions based on those sorts of things, because what if in 20 years people look back and they're like, wow, you know, we moved out to this rural thing and, you know, it wasn't, you know, beneficial to our lives because none of these scenarios played out. So I still want to be smart about that. Obviously, there's a chance that we could get power outages and things like that from the snow. That's pretty much it. I'm just not super concerned about a horrible doomsday scenario playing out. Now, I'm not going to, you know, diss the people who think that's never going to happen, because, you know, sometimes things like that do. You know, we get power outages and things like that from time to time, and I definitely don't want to diss on the people who believe in those types of things happening. Hey, you know, if there was, they would be the ones who are prepared. I'm just saying that that's not something that I'm overly concerned with. That's all. Next would be that I know that you can still have a nice fruit orchard and a nice little grape vineyard and a big garden and animals like this. You can keep all of these things even on your smaller land and just normal ordinary backyards. So because I have had my experience in my small little urban backyard, I knew that a semi-urban setting would definitely work well for us and what we were planning to do. And I knew that we have some space-saving techniques in mind to where even if we don't have a giant garden, I can still grow a fair amount of produce and stuff for our needs. And I knew that we wouldn't necessarily need that. I also understand that there are a lot of people out there who say, oh, if you don't have a homestead that's at least 10 acres, you're not even a homesteader. Or if you don't have at least 5 acres, you're not a homesteader. If you don't have at least an acre, you're not a homesteader. And that's fine. You know, everybody is entitled to their opinion, but I honestly think people can use homesteading type things even if you live in a smaller pieces of land, or even if you have just a smaller backyard. You can create a wonderful, you know, edible oasis in your backyard, even if it's an ordinary suburban backyard. Sure, you probably can't grow everything that you would need, but going hand in hand with number 8, that would be a lot of work. That was the last scenario or reason why we decided not to do the rural homestead. A lot of the pieces of land that we were looking at as we were house shopping and considering all of our options and things, we knew that it would make it to where we would have a whole lot more work to do. And I just don't want to have no free time to where every day I have to, you know, get up and take care of all this and, you know, huge amounts of land to have to mow. And how would we do that? You know, invest in expensive equipment and all this stuff. So that would probably be the last one. I still want to have my life and enjoy it too without having to work my life away. And unfortunately, I knew if we would have chosen a more rural homestead and we were going to strive to do everything off grid and, you know, grow all of our own food, that would pretty much be not only a full-time job, but maybe 2 full-time jobs, maybe more than that. So both of us, I would have to quit our jobs and get our kids to help. You know, it just wouldn't have made sense for us. And I don't want to have to do that much work. I like work, don't get me wrong, I like hard work, but I just don't want to have to be a slave to it constantly. That's all. So anyway, there are my 8 reasons why we chose to not buy a rural homestead. I would like to hear from you. So do you prefer to live out in the country? Do you prefer to live in the city? Are you a smaller homesteader, a bigger homesteader? And what do you aspire to be, even if what you have now isn't what you hope to have, you know, the whole time? And what you prefer. So anyway, hopefully this video was helpful to you. I'm Frugal Green Girl, and we'll see you next time.